In the grand theater of terrible ideas, some stand out. Think of it. The late 1930s. You have two world leaders. One wrote an entire book about how Slavic people were subhuman and that their land was Germany's for the taking. The other was the head of a global movement dedicated to violently overthrowing capitalism, which the first guy was a pretty big fan of. They were ideological poison to each other. Their propaganda posters basically just showed them slaying dragons with the other's face on it. So naturally, what did they do? They signed a friendship pact. It's the political equivalent of a shark and a crocodile agreeing to split a swimming pool. You just know it's not about the swimming. The architects of this diplomatic masterpiece were a special breed. On the German side, Joachim von Ribbentrop, a former champagne salesman who married into aristocracy and acted like he was born to rule, despite having the strategic insight of a garden gnome. His main skill was telling his boss exactly what he wanted to hear. On the Soviet side, Vyacheslav Molotov, nicknamed Stone Arse by his colleagues for his ability to sit through endless meetings without moving. He was the ultimate bureaucrat, a man whose favorite word was no. These two were sent to bridge the biggest ideological gap on the planet. It was like sending two different species of rock to negotiate a peace treaty. The outcome was predictable, solid, and heartless. So why did this happen? It wasn't a change of heart. It was a mutual, cold-blooded calculation. Stalin was terrified. He just purged most of his own military command, leaving the Red Army about as effective as a sternly worded letter. He was also staring down Imperial Japan in the east and had zero interest in a two-front war. He tried to make a deal with Britain and France, but they treated him like a crazy uncle you don't want at Thanksgiving, sending low-level diplomats on a slow boat to negotiate. Meanwhile, the German leader was desperate to invade Poland without the Soviets getting involved. He saw the Western allies dithering and realized Stalin was the only one playing the same cynical game he was. When a serious German offer landed, Stalin listened. Principles are lovely, but not as lovely as buying yourself some time. The public part of the pact was boring. We agree not to punch each other. Best regards. The real action was in a secret protocol. This wasn't some vague understanding. It was a detailed business plan for dismantling their neighbors. Poland was to be split down the middle, along the Nativ, Vistula, and San rivers. Germany gets the western, more industrial part. The Soviets get the east. Finland, Estonia, and Latvia were designated as part of the Soviet sphere of influence, a polite term for future acquisitions. Lithuania was initially given to Germany, but they later traded it to the Soviets for a bigger piece of Poland. It was like a fantasy football draft, but with sovereign nations and millions of human lives. They even threw in Bessarabia, a piece of Romania for the Soviets, just because. The actual signing on August 23, 1939, was surreal. Ribbentrop flew to Moscow, terrified the whole thing would fall apart. Instead, he was greeted by Stalin himself, who was in an unusually cheerful mood. There are photos of the moment. Stalin, the communist dictator, smiling next to a crowd of high-ranking German officials in the heart of the Kremlin. It's deeply, profoundly weird. Stalin even proposed a toast, not just to the pact, but to the German leader himself, saying, "I know how much the German nation loves its leader." This from the guy whose entire state ideology was based on destroying everything that man stood for. The champagne flowed, the deal was done, the fate of millions was sealed over cocktails and polite, deeply insincere chatter. The ink was barely dry when the non-aggression began. 9 days later, on September 1st, Germany invaded Poland. Surprise! The pact was less about peace and more about providing cover for a mugging. As the German army blitzed through western Poland, the Soviets waited. Then, on September 17th, they rolled in from the east. Their official excuse was that they were protecting their Ukrainian and Belarusian brothers from the collapsing Polish state, a state that, they were actively helping to collapse. Poland was crushed between two gears. The whole thing was capped off with the ultimate symbol of this cynical friendship, a joint German-Soviet military parade in the city of Brest-Litovsk. Soldiers who would be killing each other by the millions in 2 years were standing shoulder to shoulder, celebrating their shared conquest. History doesn't get much more ironic. With Poland taken care of, Stalin went to cash in his other chips. The Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were invited to sign mutual assistance pacts. This involved Soviet military bases appearing on their soil. Then the existing governments mysteriously vanished and were replaced by people who unanimously voted to join the glorious Soviet Union. A total coincidence, I'm sure. But Finland was different. The Finns said no thanks to Soviet demands for territory. So the Red Army invaded in November 1939, expecting a quick victory. Instead, they got the Winter War. Tiny Finland, using clever tactics and fighting on home turf, humiliated the massive Soviet military for months. The Soviets eventually won through sheer numbers, but not before proving to a certain German leader watching from Berlin that the Red Army might just be a paper tiger. This wasn't just about maps. It was a business deal. A huge economic agreement was signed, and it's one of the most grimly ironic parts of the whole story. The Soviet Union became a primary resource provider for the German war machine. We're talking hundreds of thousands of tons of grain, oil, cotton, phosphates, and crucial metals like chromium ore. This wasn't pocket change. This was the material that fueled the German invasion of France and the Battle of Britain. The rubber for German tires, the oil for their tanks and planes, the grain that fed their soldiers. A significant portion came from their supposed arch-enemy. In return, the Soviets got German-manufactured goods, naval technology, and weapons. They were literally helping arm the monster that was openly planning to devour them. The reaction around the world was, to put it mildly, confused. For years, communists and left-leaning people across the West had been told that fascism was the ultimate evil. They'd organized, protested, and even fought against it. Now, the motherland of communism was shaking hands with the devil. Communist Party leaders had to perform spectacular mental gymnastics to explain this. Suddenly, the war was no longer an anti-fascist struggle, but an imperialist conflict between Britain and Germany, and they should stay out of it. It was ideological whiplash. Meanwhile, Britain and France were just baffled. They'd spent months trying to court Stalin, only to be completely outmaneuvered by the one person they thought he'd never deal with. It was a diplomatic stun grenade that left everyone scrambling. This bizarre partnership lasted for 22 months, a period where Gestapo and NKVD agents actually met to exchange notes. All the while, the Germans were secretly planning Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, the biggest invasion in human history. And Stalin received warning after warning from his own super spy in Tokyo, Richard Sorge, from Winston Churchill, who practically begged him to listen, from German deserters who crossed the border with the exact invasion date. Stalin refused to believe any of it. He was convinced it was all British propaganda to trick him into a war with Germany. He had become so invested in his own cynical genius in this pact that he couldn't see the obvious betrayal staring him in the face. When millions of German soldiers poured across the border on June 22, 1941, Stalin was reportedly so shocked he had a nervous breakdown. The pact officially died that day, but its ghost haunted Europe for decades. In the territories the Soviets occupied, horrors like the Katyn Forest massacre occurred, where thousands of Polish officers were executed by the NKVD. The Soviets blamed the Germans for this for 50 years. Then there was the secret protocol itself. For the entire Cold War, the official Soviet line was that it never existed. It was just capitalist slander. Documents proving it were forgeries. It wasn't until 1989, with the Soviet Union crumbling, that they finally admitted it was all true. For the people of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, the pact wasn't just a historical curiosity. It was the moment their modern tragedies began, a cynical deal that handed them over to one dictator only to be betrayed by another. So, what was the point of it all? This pact is a perfect monument to the idea that you can be too clever for your own good. Both leaders thought they were playing the other. The German leader got a clear shot at Poland and the West, fueled by Soviet resources. Stalin thought he bought himself years of peace to rearm and would get to watch the capitalist and fascist powers destroy each other. In the end, they both just set the stage for their own catastrophic confrontation, the most brutal front in human history. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact serves as a timeless, grim reminder that when two people who fundamentally believe in violence make a deal for peace, it's probably a good time to start digging a bunker. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!